Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to today's Friday Reflections on this Friday, the 28th of October 2022. I hope you are well, you're tuning into this from, and things are going well in your life. Today, I would like to read from this wonderful book, Mercy Ocean's Hidden Treasures. It's one of Mawlana Shaykh Nazim's early books from the 1980s. And it's based on his Sohbets. They've been transcribed, and that's basically what's in here is the transcriptions of his Sohbets. I think it's probably 1981 or thereabouts. Yeah, I can't see the date right now, but it's about certain, perhaps 1981. And I'm going to read from page 120 of this book. Advice for instructors. Understand wisdom with your heart before you attempt to teach it. Our Grand Sheikh was speaking about people who instruct the community on Islamic religion and topics relating to its practice. According to the command of Allah Almighty, there must be some people among each community who instruct people as to what they may do, as to what has been permitted for them by Allah Almighty, and i.e. halal, and to warn them against those things which they must avoid, as they have been made forbidden to them by Allah, i.e. haram. Most people think that it is an easy job to address people, to take a book and read it, finish. So many people think that it is only sitting and speaking, either reading to the people from books and explaining, or sometimes memorizing, so that people think that he really knows a great deal. For 1 week, they prepare to give a half-hour sermon. This kind of teaching is only of the imitative kind. I know it's quite ironic. I'm actually reading this from a book of a Sohbet of Mawlana Shaykh Nazim, but this is important wisdom to understand. And anybody who tunes into my Sohbets and Friday Reflections knows my Sohbet on a Monday is from the heart. On the Friday, I read from a book. And the idea is, because within Islam, you need 2 wings to fly. One from the tradition of spirituality and from the heart, and one from the tradition of the ulama, which is from the mind. We should study both. We shouldn't just focus on only mind knowledge or only heart knowledge. We need to understand both. But that said, if we really understand Islam with depth, we have to understand which of these is really vital. And it's the one which has had less emphasis placed upon it within Islam, in especially more recent times. A really important point for an instructor of the community. Oh, before I carry on, there's another thing. I do not see myself as being some great scholar of Islam. I see myself as having a responsibility which has been given to me by my Sheikh Dawood Rossa'oin, also supported by Sheikh Sufi Abdullah, and which is also supported by Shaykh Muhammad Adil when I met him. And I told him what I do, and he gave me permission also to pass on his teachings. And there have been others. I have also been asked to be an advisor to Nadatul Ulama in the UK. But none of that makes me think of myself as some great scholar. I am simply a person doing a job that I've been asked to do. When I look, I see there are plenty of other scholars out there who I look up to and I learn from and I benefit from. But I do this because people tell me that they are benefiting from it. And why am I pointing this out? As Mawlana Shaykh Nazim will elucidate in this khutbah, or as he did elucidate in this khutbah back in the 1980s, it is vital to be humble. It is vital to guard against the nafs. Each of us is a servant of our Lord, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So it's important to keep that understanding and not to think that just because someone starts calling you imam or sheikh, or someone starts, asking you to make talks or something, that you're still a human being. You're just a human being performing a particular role within the community to, inshallah, the best of your ability. And this is why, this is why when I was looking for something to read this evening, this khutbah really stood out to me, because this is what Mawlana Shaykh Nazim is highlighting here. I'll continue reading from his Sohbet. A really important point for an instructor of the community is to understand the wisdoms that he speaks about. The fountain of wisdom is the heart, not the mind. If you can't use your heart, you can't be satisfied. As long as you are giving lessons from the mind, you and the people you are addressing are on the same level. And so you cannot teach them anything. To teach the teachings of Allah and His Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you must have learned to teach with your heart. If you teach from your heart, then the teachings will be like honey. But if you teach from your mind only, i.e., looking up information in a number of books and then reproducing it, then you resemble one who wings from flower to flower like a bee, gathering the flower's nectar and puts that into a jar and calls it honey. But that is not honey. Why not? He says, I saw a bee flying from hither to hither, gathering the nectar of flowers, so I did as he did. But no honey comes from that jar. For honey to be made, the bee must eat the nectar. Then the honey will appear of him. This is such a powerful parable, such a powerful metaphor. And how many teachers do you know, actually, either in the religious sphere or actually anywhere these days? It is rare to find a teacher who truly has digested what they teach, whether they use the books as an aid or not. But they've digested what they teach, and they actually can give it in a way which is alive, which can be understood, which can be meaningful, and which can uplift and inspire people. This is the quality of being a good teacher. And this is not something which, it's not something I often see. I don't know about you who are watching, but it's not something that I often see. And it's true what Sheikh here is saying, Grand Sheikh now. He's saying, looking up information in a number of books and then reproducing it. This is actually what a lot of people do. Look up information in books, copy that information, reword it into articles or into their own, whatever kind of written document it is, whether it's an article or a paper or dissertation, or often this is how they are written. But as Mawlana Shaykh Nazim said in another Sohbet, that we have to give something from ourselves. He didn't mean from the ego, but from your soul. How do you give of something from yourself? Well, as Maulana is highlighting here, like the bee eats the nectar and digests the nectar and then produces the honey. The honey does not come because a bee has collected nectar and put it in a pot. The bee has to digest that and transforms the bee, and the bee gives something of itself, which is pure, tasty, and it's powerful as well. Honey is a powerful medicine. But how many people are doing that? This is a point. It's so important. Therefore, you must not let yourself be fooled by those people who speak for hours and hours on religion, thinking that they give honey. Because the difference between what they give and real honey is like the difference between heaven and earth. I consider this. You can read a little couplet by Mawlana Rumi, or Bulaysha, or Ibn Arabi, and these few lines are so powerful and meaningful and transformative. Or you can read a whole essay by someone else. But it's those few lines that you read from. I mean, you look, why is Mawlana Rumi quoted so much? Why within the Indian subcontinent is Bulleh Shah quoted so much? Or Yunus Emri? Why? Just a few words are so powerful, so transformative. And other people, they're writing essays on religion or speaking that, and they're transforming nobody. People are actually turning off. The difference between what they give and real honey is like the difference between heaven and earth. People who claim to be teachers are of two kinds. One kind are like wasps who go from flower to flower like bees, but never produce any honey or beeswax. Even if they have attained the highest level of knowledge that the mind can encompass, if their teaching does not come from the heart, it isn't honey. The other kind of teachers are like the bees. Their teaching comes from the heart and is like pure honey. How does one become such a bee? The Prophet ﷺ says, if a person can keep sincerity, ikhlas, with his Lord for 40 days, then his Lord will open up fountains of wisdom for that person. During the time that Sayyidina Ali was Khalifa in Kufa, he traveled to Basra and made his rounds of all the mosques in order to listen to the people who were teaching in those mosques. After visiting each of them and hearing every instructor speaking from his pulpit, he issued a decree ordering all except Hassan al-Basri and Qadi Sharia to stop preaching. He forbade all of them to address the people in the mosques. He said that all of the instructors, other than those two, were only storytellers who parroted stories without understanding their real significance, even if they were claiming to be teaching people good. Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam gave permission only to those two to do any teaching in the mosques. For all the others, no need. Think about that. How many mosques? How many preachers? Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, he forbade them for giving khutbahs except for two of them. Why? Because he said the others were only storytellers who parroted stories without understanding their real significance. You may eat some rotten food and your stomach might become upset and you will induce vomiting. But whoever listens to something no good cannot get rid of it so easily, and it may stay with him until the end of his life. It is for this reason that their Grand Sheikh cautioned his Murids, that's Grand Sheikh Abdullah Dagestani, his Murids against listening to scholars who deny tariqas and murshids, for maybe they will poison you. If a person sits with such deniers, he must be prepared to carry a heavy burden of darkness and to live with an injured heart for 1 year. Grand Sheikh Abdullah told the following tale in order to describe people to whom you may and indeed should listen. Ibrahim bin Adam, who is known as the king of the ascetics, Sultan az-Zahidin, was a great king who one day heard the call to come into the way of his Lord. He left his kingdom and gave everything to his commanders, generals, princes, and royal family. When he was just ready to leave the palace for good, he called one of his slaves, who had been the palace gardener, and told him to come. Then he gave his royal cloak to that slave and asked him to give his gardener's cloak in exchange. The gardener was astonished at this and full of fear. He said, "How may it be possible for the lowest of servants to wear the king's royal cloak, and for the majestic king to wear these dirty old rags?" The king answered, "O my son, do you not know that last night your sultan became a slave of a slave of a slave? Now I am a slave of 7 slaves, the top one of them being a slave of the Almighty. See how quickly he came to the level of humility, how he regarded himself as being nothing, as being level with the earth." Now our Grand Sheikh says, "O Nazim Effendi," this was how, Grand Sheikh Abdullah addressing his Murid, "whoever desires to teach people in mosques and Sufi schools, Zawiya, must be very careful. especially in these times in which we are living. In the time of Ibrahim bin Adil, he counted only 7 masters. Now, in our times, if a person is not regarding himself as being on a lower level than many thousands of people, if he is not regarding himself as the slave of many people whom he deems superior to himself, then he will never be able to carry out his duty effectively. He will never make them believe in their Lord, or if they are already believing, he will never strengthen them in their faith. For example, here we are in Damascus. If an instructor of religion can't look at himself as being a slave to everyone, it means that he has some egoism, and that egoism will spread through his teachings to everyone who comes into contact with him. Grand Sheikh Abdullah was saying that if a man who addresses people doesn't humble himself and won't regard himself as being a slave in front of his audience of thousands, then those people who he is proposing to teach will, this is Mawlana's words here, piss on him and his teachings. I think because he's talking to an English audience. What I mean to say is that the people will hear so much good advice from that instructor, but they will do exactly the opposite of what they were advised. Now, how often do we see this? Even if we listen carefully to some instructors, and then they might be saying something, some sheikhs, some Mawlanas, some of the things they are saying may be good, but people will not follow what they are saying. They will do the opposite. They will do the opposite. To prevent this from happening is no easy matter, because everyone who is studying and learning still more, is in most cases going to become an egoist. And when people come to him and listen to him, they will go off and do as he does. So many big sheikhs never admit or realize the necessity of fighting their egos. They just continue amassing knowledge, which benefits neither themselves nor anybody else. Their knowledge feeds only their egos. They never consider, nor are they able to perceive, that an important element is missing from their religious lives. I mean, the irony of this, to anybody who's really read the teachings within our sacred scriptures, obviously the Holy Quran, but not only the Holy Quran, this is in the Bible. Even King Solomon, alayhi salam, I read in Ecclesiastes, oh, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. And it's in all of our scriptures. The danger of the ego, and yet time and time again we see the same thing. And we all have an ego. But how many people put into practice the need to fight that ego, to aim to tame that ego? And of course, it's difficult. This is why the Prophet Muhammad said it is the greatest jihad. And yet, this was the jihad that the Prophet Muhammad expected the Sahaba to do before they set foot on the battlefield. Such importance did the Prophet Muhammad place on this jihad, this struggle, this fight with our own ego, because our ego, it is like the inner shaitan. It is the inner shaitan, but it's Actually, it's worse than the shaitan because it's inside of us. It is part of who we are. If we do not tackle this, if we do not address this, or at least put in place some strategies to try to help to counter it, our ego will destroy whatever else we have done, whatever else good we are doing. It will level it. This is also the metaphor that we see in Georgia and the dragon. The dragon is the ego. It's not a dragon, although it is a dragon. It's the real dragon. But it's not how it's depicted. It's not a creature like that. It is the human ego. They never consider, nor are they able to perceive that an important element is missing from their religious lives because their knowledge is stopping them, ironically, from doing what they need to be doing. And yet that knowledge is going to be talking about exactly this. And so, as they won't accept training at the hands of a grand sheikh, they find themselves, along with the teachings they have imparted, being disrespected by those very people whom they were thinking to help. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance for a person who wants to teach people to truly see himself as their servant, to humble himself in front of the people he is hoping to teach. I hope, inshallah, you found that all interesting and beneficial. May Allah forgive me if I have made any mistakes in my relation of this and expansion of it. Any mistakes on my own. And may Allah bless Mawlana Shaykh Nazim, Shaykh Abdullah Fayaz Dagestani, bless their souls and raise their stations in the divine presence. And their ultimate master, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu and the Sheikhs of the Naqshbandi Tariqah, sake Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Fatiha was in shaitan regimes with Naqim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. Thank you for tuning into today's Friday Reflections. Apologies if it's a little bit later than I would have liked. But the recordings will be online, inshallah. So if you didn't catch it, then hopefully you'll be able to tune in later. I'll be back at the university, inshallah, on Monday for my Sohbet and Sufi meditations. And I look forward to seeing you there if you're in Birmingham. And if not, then you're most welcome to join me online. And inshallah, I'll be back again next week for Friday Reflections on Friday. If you're in the UK, have a very good night. And may Allah bless you and your families and loved ones. And wherever you are in the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May God bless you and God's peace be with you and your families.